Welcome to Artist Trauma, and this episode we are talking about Lady Sarashina's As I Crossed a Bridge of Dreams. It's called other things, but and she's called other things, I guess, but whatever. It's like an 11th century Japanese work. Anyway, Chris, you're the one who brought this book to my attention. What do you want to say about it to get us rolling?
So, first of all, there are certain passages where I'm like, yeah, I'm not in that symbolic structure. I don't know. But what I love about it is what does come through. I think that there's just this constant interplay between poetry, dialogue, and then kind of the story of this lady who likes to read books. Like, it's kind of a simple, almost boring story at its core, and yet it's made fascinating by so much language interplay. For the people at home, there's constantly little handwritten poems that are thrown in.
Yeah, it's basically it's a woman recounting her life from childhood to old age, I guess, as in
Mhm.
after children have already left the house, etc. And not a lot happens. There's no exciting plot. There's no stirring event. There's no big revelation.
It's
But
like she gets lonelier and lonelier, and it is
yeah,
kind of it's still kind of devastating though. Like there's definitely like this shrinking away by the end.
yeah. Now for me, my feeling about this is basically this is the most Japanese thing I've ever read. Uh,
Oh,
I,
and it is. By the way, I mean you're also kind of. I mean, this is one of the foundational Japanese texts from the Heian era,
yeah,
if my understanding's correct.
yeah, but it's like I was starting to notice a similarity between other Japanese writers that I've read, like Soseki and Akutagawa and Datsai. Even though like they're pretty heavily influenced by Western literature, they still there is this sort of sense of like passive withdrawal from life, a faint humorousness or bemusement at mortal actions, and of course, this excellent sense of elegance and balance, as you put it to me once. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
and
The
this
balance
was, and this
definitely.
was to me like, okay, all that, drop the Western elements, okay,
Yeah,
like it's just the pure balance. It's like events are not something we really talk about here. It's more the impressions, the moments, the I woke up this morning to the sound of water birds, something like
like,
that.
and I wrote this poem, and the poem is like, I woke up to the sound of water birds.
Yeah, it's
It's
just,
like, it's like there's so many poems where I was like, well, that's kind of just what you said earlier.
well,
It's a very minimal poetic motion. It's not like she's trying to gild the lily, you know.
yeah, it's. I mean, one thing. This really. We'll talk more about the sense of life of this work that I'm picking up on here. Think I'm picking up on is there's this sense of sort of what would be the term, withdrawal from life, this sense of, as in, all the things that she talks about are not the things that you or I would talk about or put focus on in a autobiography. In our autobiographies we would mention the time when we got married, we would mention the birth of our children, we would
The
mention.
fact that the dad was gone for years. That part killed. So yeah, Ray's really hitting on something, but I kind of want to clue it into the text. So in this text, the husband shows up and it's almost comically strange because we never get introduced to the man. It's just my husband, and then there's kids. Like she has these children and we don't know who these people
Yeah,
are
she just
at all.
mentions it in passing. It's just
Yeah,
like, it's like, okay. And I was also surprised, like, you spent all this time about how you and your sister like once like adopted a cat and had a
love that
dream about
chapter,
your
very
cat.
strange. Yeah.
And then you just sort of casually, oh yeah, and she got married, and you know, it's like, wait. You got all this, but you don't even mention that. Like, that seems like a big event in a household. This is not an event that you gloss over.
And this is like an upper middle class, maybe wealthy, there's by the end wealthy household where it's very loving, clearly. Like it's not like a household where it's like no one liked each other. She makes it very clear that there's like a deep connection to her father, which she actually does talk about. Um, and but then like with the mom, it's not really sure. It's just I forgot there was a mom, and then the mom showed up, and it was like, what?
Yeah, like the mother.
What?
Actually, I didn't
Is
even
she
realize
important?
that
Like,
like they talk about the father, but like there's no like. Well, I can maybe understand a little more why the mother isn't mentioned because she sounds a little bit like a bitch, from the few.
yes, yes. She like doesn't she leave? But then there's a stepmom, and I'm like, I have no idea who these people
Okay,
are.
okay, the step. Oh God, yeah. Okay, I'm not sure exactly about the genealogical chart here. The step when the step early on in the book when the stepmother left, and that was a big sad event.
And she was important and nice or
Yeah,
something. Like she
and
liked her.
and then her mother. I guess that's a new mother or something like that. Or if her father remarried, which maybe you should have mentioned that. Um, but it's like no, it's like okay, okay. We mentioned what's not in the book. Let's talk about what's in the book.
Um,
It's just things like, oh, I went on a pilgrimage to here. Oh, I was so delighted to finally get some stories from a friend. Oh, there was a man who I once had a nice conversation with, and then we sort of once had a glimmer of of each
yeah,
other later, and so on. Like there was that's all they're like this is the extent of the not. I mean, just like the fact of like, oh, I woke up one morning and saw how beautiful the moon was falling upon the trees, and that's kind of it. Um,
yeah. Although it's weird, and I by the way, we're also reading one translation. I'm sure that this text is I can't imagine how vastly different it is throughout the centuries of translations. I mean, I can't even fathom. But
yeah, yeah,
this translation at least starts us off with like a really fucking traditional Bildungsroman from Western culture. Like, I was brought up in a part of the country so remote that it lies beyond the end of the Great East Road. Like, that's how many like fantasy novels start off?
yeah. I
I
know,
was from the Eastern.
Like Luke on Tatooine, or
Yeah, like oh Aragon, or it's like all of these things. It's like I was a man born, I was a little boy born in the provinces far from the seat of empire, and it was like, oh, so this is like a traditional novel, and that no, it does not go. And
no, no. I
like
mean,
we have a desire for the tales at the beginning, and you're like, oh, this is going to be important, and it obviously is, but she gets them pretty fast.
well, like the thing is like we don't get okay, what are so let's talk about the things this book doesn't have a little more. It
Mm.
doesn't have characterization in the traditional sense. As in, like, the main, the lady writing, the narrator, like, okay, we get a little sense of her, but we're not like getting all the twitterings of the heart and the twitches of the face and gesticulations and thoughts rushing past each other. This is not the kind of novel we get, and we're not getting involved witty dialogue or something like that.
No,
We're not getting a plot, certainly.
no, but what instead we are getting is a way of treating dialectic motion that I've just never seen before.
Okay,
The
yeah. Define dialectic.
method of conversation, so or a way of back and forth between at least two people.
Okay, dialogue.
Yeah, dialogue, and well, there's not a lot of there's a lot of words from other people she puts in there, but there is a way, and the reason I'm using the word dialectical is because the poems are always what is in conversation with each other. It's something we don't have as
Yeah,
much.
yeah. I mean, it's like it's a constant feature of this book where one person meets another one, and even sort of like a slightly dramatic situation, like we just happen to meet in the hallway and have to rush out and say something. It's like I give you a poem, like I say a poem, and you say a poem back, or I'm just quietly sitting and listening to something in a room with other women in the middle of the night, and I say something, and the woman who seemed to be sleeping gives me another poem right on back.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was weird.
yeah,
There's so many moments in this book. By the way, okay, so what this book does give you is like one of the strangest collages and introspective views of subjectivity I've ever read. I mean, just it is all over the place with hints and utterances and images, and it's kind of like it's like literary candy without plot in a sense. Like I enjoy every page of this book so much for me.
Yeah, it was there wasn't a dull moment. It sort of worked because of how foreign the thing is, but
Yeah.
it's there's nothing dull about this work. I mean, like basically now, okay, now this is basically I guess speaking a little more now more positively of like, okay, well, what is in there? My basic feeling reading this was of a sense of life is a kind of mist, dream, smoke that is elegant and beautiful and entirely ephemeral. Like that's just like the sense that you get, and those are the sorts of moments. It's basically like, it talks a lot about, the sadness of leaving her childhood home, and this, you just like crying because the singing people in the forest that they met leaves them, and which was crying being servants who can't cross the river with them and have to go back to their lodgings, and
Yeah.
just talking about, I mean, one thing is like the events that do actually, like more traditional events that besides
The
this,
death of the sister.
yeah, like I
That
mean,
was a real event, and it had like that one, instead of there being like the poems being positioned dialectically, they were positioned as like and then, because it was like each one was commenting on grief, and they were just adding a position on grief to each other. I thought it was really cool. I don't know. It was just like neat. I don't know. Like I was in there, like I got the grief, but I also still was like, yeah, but we're not animals. We still have form.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
it's, I mean, like, and it's really just, it's fascinating the way that his grief gets a lot of page time in this book. Just like, again, it's like, the death of the cat, an old nurse leaving, the death of a sister, the death of your husband, the loss, your children moving away. Like, all of these are the sorts of events.
Yeah, missing people in general is how it ends. Missing the nun, um, and then also the father's absence. It really, actually, that was one of those moments where I was really not sure if it was intentional on her part, but after finishing it, I think everything's pretty intentional here since it was written after the husband passes away. Did you notice how the father, sorry, not the husband, the father goes to the provinces, and it's like a really teary, like it's kind of a terse goodbye, but they really love each other and whatever. And then like 2 chapters later, she's like, the years without father were hard. And there's this huge dissonance between flipping the page and like years had gone by, and like our natural reading of thinking that, I don't know. Basically, I just could not ever tell what time we were in and how
Yeah,
time
like that
passed.
happened to me a few times where it's a little bit hard. And like she even like sort of highlights that of like, if you keep reading it, like she just describes a pilgrimage or something she makes, and she says, "Yeah, if you keep reading this book, you might get the impression that I was going on nonstop pilgrimages, but no, no, these there was years between each of these events." And it's like, okay, well, I'm glad you're aware of the impression you're creating.
And
Um,
it's funny because I'm like, you visiting shrines around the country isn't really eventful. Like it's
yeah,
fine. Like
it's
I'm glad you're in a leisure class and get to go on vacations. I
I mean,
mean,
it's just sort of like, if I just like wrote my autobiography and like, yeah, yeah, that's that winter I went to Miami, and then that summer I went to Boston, and then that springtime I went to California. But this was over the course of a decade, and I had like two or three children in the meanwhile. Uh, that's
like, oh yeah, my husband. There's a horrible meme. It's not really relevant with the person, but I feel like there's a little bit of this in this book where it was some horrible mass murderer had like orange hair and was completely crazy. And it
yeah, I
was
think
a
I
meme, and
know.
it showed him sitting in court and he's like, what am I doing here? And then the next panel is him going, oh shit, the murders. And like there's a little in this book of like, oh fuck, I have a husband.
Yeah,
Like I
well, it's that's,
my
that's
oh yeah, I
gonna be,
forgot.
well, that was one thing that that is the most profound misunderstanding of this work you could ever state. No, I know, I get, I agree with what
Right.
you're doing there. I'm doing what you're doing there, but it's almost like it's opposite of, it's
It's very clearly on purpose,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's, I
I
mean,
mean,
I feel like the whole conception is, I mean, okay, one thing that it says about the husband when the husband dies is he passed away like a dream, you know, and when they cremated him, he, you know, his body passed away with the smoke.
yeah.
And that's to me just the image of life that's created in this work. And well, to the extent that I've like consumed uh traditional Japanese visual art and heard a little bit of its music, um
Yeah.
there is this sense of elegant dreaminess of this world isn't quite real. It's faint, and values are not the sort of things you pursue. I mean, one thing that's interesting in the book is it's recounted this little sequence of this conversation she has with a very elegant gentleman, who, you know, has very deep sincere feelings about life, and you know, she wants to see more of him because is implicitly, it's like, yeah, because she's had dreams of I forget the names of these people, but of shining Genji, you know, coming and
Of
being her
course.
lover.
Yeah.
um and you know, we have that one conversation, we have a like two lines of dialogue when they happen to meet in a palace, in the palace one day,
Yeah.
and that's the end of that. that's just the end of that. And he gets more
I did
screen
take it
time
as
than her husband.
yeah. I did take it as fairly bittersweet though. Like it was
Yeah,
compact, but there was like there are too many people. I was very effectively moved by it, even
yeah,
though
no, it was great. It was great, but like the point is, it's this very faint glimmer
yeah,
of romance in this, and that's it. You get glimmers,
yeah,
you get glints. You never get substance. You never get the hard fact.
yeah. And you also get kind of positioning this I remember one time my old teacher Tom DeLeo was talking about the difference between Western and Eastern art. And he was kind of like also saying this is impossible to actually delineate. But in general, if you take a very Western example, like a Balzac novel, like The Unknown Masterpiece, um, there's this sense of a line, DeLeo said. It was like a line headed towards a goal. The story begins at A and you wind up at B. And he always talked about Eastern, but he was meaning Indian, but I think it functions totally well here as more like a deepening spiral
Yeah,
where
no,
it's just
I
spiraling
I
down. Because
agree with that. No, I mean, like
page one, it's like the same content as page 90, you know?
yeah, I agree with that emphatically. At least to the, again, to the degree that I've consumed classical Eastern art. That's like, yeah, there.
I also just feel like we can take a little confidence. Like, if this isn't classically Japanese, then I have no tools to recognize what it would be. You know, like, I think we
As
can
an
kind of
idea, as an
go for
okay,
it
I
there.
guess what we can say is that description is a very precise description of this book.
Yeah.
And to me, like, there's a certain sense, I don't, yeah, I don't feel this obviously because, you know, my home is Western art, but there's a certain, like, after reading this, the idea of reading Balzac with all of his characters, you know, heaving and sweating and furiously grasping at their values, at their, you know, the mawkish humor and the sense of like build up and excitement and climax, all of it just feels a touch vulgar.
Yeah.
um all of it feels heavy handed in a certain way compared to the ephemeral delicacy of 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 this book as I crossed a bridge of dreams. Is that even a line? Did you actually catch that line being used in this book? By the way, as I crossed a bridge of dreams, was that in one? I think it
Oh,
was one of her
I think
dreams.
it's I just think it's a title they made up because there's no real title. It's just a,
Yeah,
here's
yeah,
a box with some letters in it, I guess.
yeah.
I
But
mean,
oh, by the way, we have to mention that again one two of the major substances of this book are poetry and dreams. Um,
yeah.
two things of decided unreality in a sense of um
Now building a bridge between Eastern and Western though, there is some fundamental artistry, like the those two realms as places of fictionalization, you know, come through really well. But I really think it's saying that, it's like the world of fiction is not in the fairy world or here. It's this constant borderline. Like, I don't know, like she just kept moving things in from the content into the poems, and I found it really deliberate. And like I was like, but what like really actually changes when the same words are lifted into poetry? And it's like, oh, here it is in the regular world, and then here I am in the slightly askew dream world of poetics. And I think it's just kind of this boundary line that keeps going back and forth,
well,
maybe.
I mean,
What's a better way to talk? How do you, yeah, how, I mean, something like that.
well,
Do it better
it's
than I'm saying it.
I mean, it's okay. Well, here's an example for you of
Yeah.
like we get this Eastern Western comparison. How does this compare to Crap's last tape? Um, it as in Crap's last tape is in a sense very similar in that
Hmm.
it's this sort of exhausted end of your life recollection, and you're making a tape. You're making this object, in a sense like they make poems, and he's looking back on past tapes, and in his past tapes he's looking back on past tapes. um it's there's this same kind of introspective uh regret, almost like there's a similar quality between them. And also like with Endgame, from last week, it's like there's a circularity to Endgame.
Yeah.
It's like it's never actually ending. You're always just in the middle of things. Finality is never final.
Yeah.
And it's
I'm
like
sending, I'm sending you the linear form of Crap's last tape for me. It's very simple, but it looks like nonsense until I describe it. And I don't know if I can show everyone, but this is the tapes. You have a primal A, the first tape. You have A prime, the next, iteration. Then you have A prime prime slightly diminished, lowercase. Then you have it slightly more diminished, and then you lose that first event, and you just have reiterations of whatever leftover affects there are from the original content. That's my that's my Crap's last tape.
yeah, yeah, it's just that subtler recording, losing stuff in the process. It was it was
Yeah.
actually really funny. I watched a video of it was a I forget the exact name of the song, but it was a Rick Ashley song, um, and it was being played on a VHS and then recorded again, and then recorded and played again, and recorded and played again, and you just
Oh
have
wow.
this slow thing, and it's like you hear this Rick Ashley saying, "Never gonna put you down," and no, never gonna let you down, never gonna, yeah, and it's like, and like,
Yeah.
well, he is actually because it's fading away. It's like really sad in a certain perspective, that decay, and that's kind of Crap's last tape. Like you're hearing these words again and again, and they become more and more distant and broken and sad in
Yeah,
their
that in the
process.
contemporary music world, we sometimes call that the technique sonic erasure.
Hmm.
Um, so it's, you know, I mean, it's pretty
Yeah,
self-explanatory.
yeah, like that's just yeah.
But that's just what we sometimes call it. It's people have kind of given it a name because a lot of composers have used that technique. Um, it's very effective technique because it
Yeah,
really
it's very
does
effective to me.
everything
Like,
into toasts, you know?
like some of my favorite songs like have that. Like, yeah, there's parts of this that feel like they're missing. It's parts of this that feel like it was lost through a VHS conversion or something. And like that's
Um,
very touching and effective to me.
so let's contrast. So if Craps tape is sort of that, it's still linear, but that kind of diminishment each iteration. Um, I don't sense a diminishment in the same way with this text. I get sort of a spiraling down motion where I think she does become alone, and there is a process of becoming more alone. And I think that's my only linearity, actually, is that there is I'm becoming more alone as the chapters go on.
Yeah, yeah, as in, I mean, basically, she starts off with, wanting to read all these tales. She later gets them and has dreams of being with Genji, and I mean, she loses people along the way, and she spends time at court, as a lady in waiting, and she doesn't commit to it, so she doesn't get anywhere, and I mean, as time goes on, she's more and more burdened by regrets of I wish I had persevered in court, and then I could have, actually have something significant could have happened, and I wish that I had instead of spending all the time doing tales, I had done my sutras, and then all these tragedies wouldn't have befallen me, and um,
Yeah, but there is also a sense reading that which is sort of like trying to read her desire. You're like, no, this lady has a part of her that really fundamentally like really wants to be alone. Like she's really not not only be alone, but like there's so much of it of this book about imagery of being alone, of being in the moonlight, of the positive sides of it. And there is a sort of sense at different points that she could have just been with more people. Like she didn't have to become isolated at every turn. Some of them she did, obviously, but not all of them, you know.
yeah, let's see, does she actually want to be? I mean, there's a certain sense of that melancholy of like enjoying the sadness that's sweet, as some poet put it, with it, and like that's, I mean, that's not even something I actually draw attention to in Japanese culture. It's just like, yeah, they're just talking about the sadnesses um and gruesomeness quality of life. Gruesome isn't the right word, it was something else, um but it's like, yeah, it's like that's just something that they pay attention to. Um,
Yeah, it's what is that phrase? Mano no aware. That might not be appropriate, but like the pathos of all things.
hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that's interesting.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So we've done a lot situating this book. I have a couple moments I really
Yeah,
liked.
yeah. Let's get into concrete
Um,
moments. Maybe we should
I
start there.
actually would also say this is a book of moments. Like this is a formal book, a book of
Yeah, just
smaller, right? It's small.
yeah, like just like a stacking of impressions.
Yeah. So right near the end, page 105. Um, oh, that one I just liked the translation. After all the commotion of their departure, I found time hanging heavily on my hands. I like that.
Mhm.
I also wrote that's kind of the essence of the book. is is what do I do with this time? And then she makes it artistic, so adds the
Mhm.
alliteration, the metaphor, and that gives it this pathos. So it's not just dead airspace. Because I get the sense that the battle with her is not like I get the sense that she's torn wanting to be alone, but I also get the sense that it's like, how do I make my alone time aesthetic? Or how do I deal with my alone time in a way that's palatable? And artistry and seems to be the response in a simple way, maybe.
Well, I'm not sure if that's the response. It seems like it's in her younger
Yeah,
life, she spent most of her time reading books and like studying the tales of Genji and so on.
right.
It's her later life, and in her later life, it's like, oh God, I gotta get on this religion business here. I gotta do my sutras. That's what it seems
Mm,
to be, and I mean, she does spend time. She does mention she has correspondences with friends. And at least like for at least, I don't know, the middle period of her life, she's got a fairly active social life. It seems like that's talking with people and so on. Like her parents comment on that. Um,
that's true. That's
so
true. So, but anyway, I liked that moment. I thought it was a nice moment. And then I'm going to give one more moment that's just about chapter length, but I thought it was deeply effective, whether it was intentional or not. The movement from chapter 31 to 33, I thought was fairly effective. Um, so you have a longer chapter in 29,
mhm.
and then 30 gets shorter, and then you have a spitfire rapid take of chapters. And because we know how weird this book is with time passing, I just got the sense of immense time passing. Just
Yeah,
like, oh, here's
yeah.
a moment in
There's
1925. Oh, here's a moment in 1927. And it's like, oh my God, time is just free falling by chapter 33. And I thought it was, it's almost a postmodern technique, but done exactly the way it was so tastefully done.
yeah. No, I'm very much on board with that acceleration of time. I feel like um I haven't watched the movie, unfortunately, but there's a film called A Ghost Story, that's about loss. And one thing that's very notable about the movie is just how like, and basically about dealing with grief, is
Yeah.
just how like time just speeds up as you go through it. How grief begins as this like very intense, agonizingly long thing, and then as time goes by, it speeds up and normality of life kicks in, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
It's like, so like, yeah, and I see what you mean there. I didn't pick up on that, but that's a great point. Uh,
But before I switch over to you, can I give you one more thing I liked about the book?
oh yeah. You give me. I don't. Is that?
There's so many moments in this book too. Like, I think you could study this book for your whole life as your one work of art and come out a pretty good artist at the end.
I wonder.
So I thought something really interesting about her memoir is so much of it is occupied by other people's words. But as we already said, no descriptions. No, like my mom, who is 6'7" and the worst person in the world. But they're other people's words are so important in this book that the ending of the entire book isn't her own words. It's the
Yeah,
word random nun lady who gives like my favorite poem in the book. So it's like this weird thing where it's like it's just constantly all these other people are displaying their poetry. And so you realize that poetry this isn't just the fantasy world. It's almost the world where she feels it's like where the culture actually gets communication done or something. I don't know. It's very different from us, so it's hard to describe, but it was
yeah,
very well done.
yeah. It's such a. It's just this world of like, well, all the poetry is more or less just giving you like bits of impressions.
Yeah.
Like it's just giving you like, yeah, like I heard the birds coming down, or I what would have the I never would have known the temple had those pillars not stood for all the years. It's something like that, just like some little snippet like that,
Very,
all
very
these little
simple.
momentary
Just like an
impressions. And that's, but the thing is like that sort of impressionistic style like, that is being used is like, well, that's the whole book. The whole
right.
book is a series of, yeah, this is my impression when I went to this temple, and this is when I had that dream. No, remember the time when we got the cat. Um, um, that the cat burned alive, but um,
Yeah, that was there is a that was the horrifying when I actually looking back on it. It's
Yeah,
like
it's like that's
it's a funny story, right? It's like and that chapter 4 is one of those moments in the book where I think there's a couple moments where you see her, you get to know her a little bit more than not as like an eternal ghost of feminine presence. like like there's moments where she's a person. And I think that chapter 4 is one of those moments with the cat story, and then another moment is the flirtation with the man. And the most for me where I got her sense of personality is what I guess the word I'm trying to find is when she goes to court and goes, see ya. Those are all moments where I got into her brain a little more, I guess, than other moments.
yeah, it's let's see.
It'd be funny if a Japanese scholar would say, "Yes, those 3 moments are the only imperfections of the book." Because it's like,
I mean, the thing is like there's, God, it's such an odd document. It's from my experience. It's hard to it's hard to convey. Um, as in like, what is this personality? Do I actually believe in this lady Sarashina? I don't exactly know. It's like there's still this like impersonality hanging over, and like yeah, there's like little bits and differences about her, like the fact that she was very uncomfortable being at court. It's like that she just did not like that atmosphere, and that she wanted to go back to her parents, and but so many of those are almost abstract.
well, I would say it's slightly different. I'd say that like she feels kind of removed from her presence wherever she is. So she feels removed from her presence at court, but she's kind of feels removed from the presence of wherever she is. Like we don't get the like she says they laughed all night and had a great chat, and part of me is like, what if the reality was she just went off on her own? Like
I, I'm
there's
sure
some
I'm sure
distance.
that's the way it was, but like I guess what's so odd about it is yeah, and it would be impossible literarily for her to actually give us those jokes. Like to actually like all it can sort of be is this sort of faint image of that. Now there's sort of I feel like there's one or two like funny things in the book that's like supposed to be a bemusing,
Yeah.
but it's again a very sort of polite titter, um not a full-blown laugh, not a balzac kind of joke. um
No, that would
yeah,
be
like,
that would have made us like vomit. If
yeah.
there was all of a sudden like a sex joke, I would have been like, what? I would have been even more perplexed. And I would
Are
not,
you
but that would have been bad, I thought. I think if I saw that, I was like, I don't know why she put that in there. It's not consistent. Um, I think she's formal. I mean, so much of this, like there's an interplay between the form of poetry and the form of memoir, and then the structure of the story conveys the humor. So like the cat story is kind of a classical, you know, here's a beginning, here's a middle, and here's an end. Um, and it's humorous because it has a structure, but
well,
I don't think the book has a structure in the way that this. I think the structures are all small. They're all internal.
yeah,
Like I
it's
don't think I have like a flow other than the flow of her life and those few moments of chapter length between chapter 1 and 30 whatever. I don't have an arc.
yeah, and there's no arc. It's yeah, I think what you're saying of a downward spiral is kind of all there is about it.
Yeah.
It's like it's not exactly like with Crap's last tape where it's like no, this is I mean, there's a certain kind of spiral to that, a little bit of like the fact that it's recollecting and you're hearing it again, but it's still like by the end you start somewhere and you end somewhere different with Crap.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, like he starts off sort of just this I don't know, like very I don't know, he's just a guy an old stupid man just sort of having a
Yeah.
banana, and then by the end it's like he's mourning the tragedy of his life, the emptiness of where he's ended up. Like it begins like with this grotesque sort of farce with bananas, and then ends with just crying over having nothing. And here it's like, no, it's not like that. It's not. It's like, yeah, it's just, yeah, life. It's just this series of impressions that come across the screen and then vanish.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. I think another thing that becomes kind of interesting about the form, re-saying what I said earlier, where like a lot of other people's words are in here, is like right at the beginning, she tells this like super never-ending story from
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
else,
I
and it was
forgot about I
really
forgot about the
weird.
stories that she tells in the beginning of the book.
And
Yeah,
it, but like this, so we start the book on page 30, like one, right? And on 36, just a couple pages later, there's this story that goes on starting at the middle of the page and all the way over to 38. And it's fine, but it's just odd, you know. It's just like it's just not like if a student brought you that, it'd be like, okay, these are a lot of other people's words, but what are your ideas? But
yeah,
yet
and,
it
and then there's like
somehow
another
works.
one, like almost like a couple pages later. It was much shorter, but it was still there. And it's like, what? Okay, like we're having just a tale of tales here. Um,
Well, and I actually that's there's a third form. Then you have the short stories from these random people at the beginning, you have the haiku, and you have her prose, and number four you have her dreams.
yeah,
You have a lot of different, what do you want to call it? I don't even want to call it, they're not all formally different, but like zones of activity, I guess, or places of writing. Like it's just there's four different, really different things always happening, and they can kind of jump in at random.
yeah. It's again just the fact that art is so much a part of this work. It's actually it's a bit in my mind like what is it? J.K. Oisman's Against Nature or Our Rabar.
Mm.
Um, where basically it's like a big. It's about basically a decayed aesthete withdrawing from life and into his world of art. And there are entire chapters devoted to his opinions on Latin literature, to
Mm.
his opinions on contemporary French literature, to
Yeah.
to his opinions on the painting of Gustave Moreau and Odilon Redon. It's like, oh, okay, like this is a book. We're having this book about literature. That's fine. That's excellent, and it characterizes Des Esseintes, the main character, but Jesus Christ, um,
It's a
Jesus Christ,
uh,
it's
at the
like
beginning of
this is a
the
simile.
Skin. Yeah, Malaparte does that where it's really like a witness novel, and so in the Skin, it's like there'll be just like completely outlandish stuff that can't happen, like a bunch of gay men make a fake baby and carry it through the town, and it's like this is clearly obviously not happening, and like this is magical realism and very deeply strange, and then it'll just be like, and Proust, man, like, and then it'll just talk about Proust for a bit, and you're like, okay, I guess it's the same thing, right? Where you're like, I guess we're doing that. um it gets a little boring at the opening of that book, but I guess it's a way of doing things. It's a way of doing business, I guess, so to speak. Uh, I would say this though, having passed 1,000 years, everything becomes fiction to me. You know, like all these stories and these memoirs, it becomes more on the side of fiction than on the side of memoir, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's just sort of the way I'm reading it. It's yeah, this is a as far as it matters, it's a work of fiction in my mind. Um,
Yeah.
like it has a lot of dates in the book. Um, so many times it says on the 11th month and the 12th day I did this.
But
Um,
like, but like what was great about it, and I kept going back to it, and it was driving me nuts until I realized it was super intentional, is there's never any years. And then when I first read the book, it was driving me nuts that I had no sense of time. And then by the end, I was like, oh, that's the whole point, is I don't know how much time has passed.
Yeah, it's just not her concern. Just like major events in life are not particular. I mean, I guess what you could say is her motive in writing this was not to recount her life, but just to give off the interesting impressions she got here and there. It's just interesting that those impressions are not at all the places that you or I would put them. Again, it's not those things that are like, yes, this is traditionally the great moment of your life.
Yeah, it's kind of like so the philosopher Graham Harman, he was like, you know, 5 million things do not happen to you in the course of your life. Probably 15 things happen to you in the course of your life. And he, whether you're aware of them or not, but some of them you're aware of. You get married, you choose the school you go to. That's an event. You go to a certain school. And this lady's like, well, I don't care about any of those. Mine are the ones that are in the cracks. And the events of it's more like not the events of her life, but it's like the event of her life. Like it's
Yeah,
one
that's
thing.
like a that's like Aldous Huxley, in one of his good novels.
Yeah.
Um, he mentions how memory is a lot like it just the experience of it is a lot like you have a a camera that just goes off at random, and like the things that you remember are a lot of the time just kind of irrelevant to anything else, seemingly. And how a lot of times for like kids, like the things that strike them are not the things that like you or I would think are a big deal. Like, okay, like yeah, they didn't think Napoleon's tomb was that big of a deal. But they did remember like seeing the cabman sitting under the umbrella on the side of the road. Like that just stood out to them as
Yeah.
as like something significant. And like that attitude is very much uh Lady Sarashina's attitude of like, no, yeah, like the big event of my marriage. Yeah, that just wasn't as big of a deal as that time I saw the cabman sitting um under the umbrella.
Yeah.
That was just kind of I made a poem to that, and that stuck with me in a way that was much more meaningful.
No, I think you're totally right. And I also to kind of combine what we're saying, one of the striking things about the end of the start of the last chapter, 34, is it goes, many years have passed, and you're like, okay, since what? Like I'm old now? Like I have no idea. Many years have passed, but whenever I think about that sad, dreamlike time, my heart is thrown into turmoil. But it's not exactly clear what time we're referring to. I took it as the time of her husband's death, but
I,
it kind of also just sounds like the event of her life is sad, you know? It's hard to say for me what time she's referring to.
yeah, it's unfortunate. It is very kind of just I don't want to have a life like this. I just want to do stuff with my life. I don't just want to sit around and read stories and um,
I know there's a certain aspect of reading this book where I'm like cozy, like, oh yeah, this is very cozy. And then there's other points where I'm like, no, this is really depressing and sad.
yeah,
And I want to
like
go out and
you,
be with my partner and go off to a show and go to the movie with my wife. Like, get me out of here, God.
yeah, like I
Go on
like to write a like she
a
does write a
book.
book eventually,
I guess you read a book. Yeah, okay, so I like this East versus West difference because it helps me also read the book. Because so the first time I read this book, I was sort of baffled by it, but I also knew it was one of my favorites. I've just never read anything like this, and I love it. And this time I pick up a lot more, and I realize I think this is sort of the text where I'm gonna have more of a lifelong relationship with, because on the second read, God, there's just so much there. It's too much for in one
yeah.
read.
For me, it was I think okay. I didn't love the book. I thought it was good. Um, I didn't fall in love with it, but I will say that this was a very important experience. Like,
Mm,
I've gotten much more out of this book than many other books that I've read. It really clarifies, like, oh, literature can be this. It's like you can have this whole different way of feeling about things. Jesus Christ,
yeah,
like that was what was marvelous, and I guess the way this book traumatized me was just this dreamlike vision of life. It's just these series of short snapshots that are beautiful and delicate and ephemeral and tragic. Um, and then you move on. It's just that I just that vision of like detachment, elegant detachment from life and values is just so perfectly crystallized here. It's
yeah,
like, oh, now I know what Western literature is about
yeah,
compared to Eastern.
yeah.
Um,
And there's also, by the way, a sense where in describing it, like I almost wanted you to burst into a nature poem. But right, because it's like this book is like, and then I'm gonna do a poem, right? It's like I'll give one of her snapshots, it's like the first ice on a winter's day. It's there in the morning, and by noon the sun has melted it, or something like that, right? Like
yeah,
that
yeah,
she would
something
just
like that.
completely write, right? Like, and it's that ephemeral image. I think also another thing that I loved about it too is I I think there's a lot of revelations I had that you can have so many different registers happening at one time. You can tell stories, poems. Here's my narrative, and it can be really controlled, so it's not like really messy. Because I think on the Western edge, if I was like, okay, I'm writing a book, it has all my dreams, poems, and some short stories from other people, and like letters and the words of other people. You're gonna be like, wow, that's gonna be really hard to make that make sense architecturally.
Yeah,
And this gives you a path, I think, where it's like, well, no, she makes it work because look, this is how it all fits together with a logic, I would say.
yeah. Like, and that's another aspect of just like how much it brings in of other sort of narrative forms.
Yeah, I don't know. And I also feel like I like this time period. I'm a little intimidated by the other books from this time period.
Yeah, yeah. Like I was
Right.
looking up like
The
that
Tale of
tail
Genji is pretty
Genji is a
long.
rather fat thing.
And it was also like it was common at the time not to, it was like important not to use people's names. And it's like, well, that's just like awful to read then. Like it's fine if it's a memoir of one lady, but if it's a third person story, like it sounds apparently it's actually really hard to read.
Yeah, yeah. So well, I guess we'll just have to figure it out. I mean, one thing that was funny was just like when Lady Sarashina was herself saying, um, "Yeah, I'd at times gotten glimpses of the tale of Genji, but I couldn't make it out. I couldn't understand it. Now I actually have. Now I own it. I'll have the free time to actually figure it out at my leisure." Um,
Yeah.
it's like so. It's like, oh great, the fucking 11th century Japanese women have trouble reading that book.
It is also another great example of the mysteries for the ancient Egyptians were the mysteries for the ancient Egyptians themselves. Because it's like, oh yeah, this Tale of Genji. Wow, this is really hard to read. I'm like, well, yeah, you're right. Like, fuck, I don't know how we're supposed to read it.
So so maybe an abridged version or something that could
Well,
make
I
it
have another one
help.
I have that I'm sure is another classic. Again, a woman writer. I mean, again, this is an era where it's a lot of women are doing the heavy hitters of literature, but is the Pillow Book, which is
Yeah,
more
yeah.
aphorism and like story of court life. Because what I'd like this is great and everything, and it's one of my favorite books. But one thing I also like is drama, and character. Like, I mean, like this can't be all of it, what we're doing. So
Yeah,
like,
I
even though
have
I
to.
love it, like it's great. It's just not really, my usual day-to-day plot pacing. And I just have to believe that there has to be more drama in these other texts from that period.
Yeah,
And I want to see
I
how they
have
look.
to imagine that there's a little more going on in these other stories. At least, oh God,
I mean,
somebody
Court Life
killed.
sounded like a reality TV show. So I want to see that side of Japanese life also, not just this sort of like woman of the mountains
Yeah.
view of
So
things.
I would very much like to see that too. And so what in what way did this book traumatize you, Chris?
So I think it was kind of where I loved it was also traumatizing as like, oh wow, this is a whole new set of techniques and crafts. I mean,
Mhm.
even though it's old, it's new for me, and I don't know how to navigate that world. But I'd like to because I think there is obviously a there. This is a foundational text, and it also moved me. So what was traumatic about it is on one hand the idea that this is a very old, very foreign text from a position in life that's not very similar to mine. Um, and yet I was just there with her. Like it's somehow translated so easily. Like I was like, how is this so easy to understand for me? So I
Well,
guess that
it was
identification.
translated, but
Well,
uh,
yeah, but I mean, even the idea of like, I'm not really like just going on vacation. I was like, okay, like it came through really easily. The idea of like that she was aware of how we would be reading that was pretty cool. I thought
yeah.
it's sort of a universal. It's like even though we can get on the wavelength of this, there's still this extreme distance between the cultures that shows in the art, and that distance is really cool. I think.
Yeah, actually, some point of like the sort of distances, and but I think one thing that was familiar, very familiar to me in the sense of it reminded me a lot of Maeterlinck, Pele
Oh,
Sand's,
yeah,
like
yeah,
like there was this. I mean, Maeterlinck feels so much more substantial. I never thought I'd say substantial with regard to Maeterlinck in my life. Um, but it still had this sense of, yeah, we're almost just seeing these little snapshots of these dimly unreal people as they roll along to the dance of fate. It's
yeah. I think you're right. I also think another thing that is hard for me to do because I really like overanalyzing. I really like getting into the details. Is there are certain things in this book that I just have to say I don't know. So, like for example, why is she doing certain things? We just I don't know. Like why? Like I know it's effective, and so we can describe it descriptively really well. But for example, I'm guessing that there was some symbolic prohibition in writing that time that is totally incomprehensible to us. Like something like you have to speak about your relatives with a deference becomes something different. It's like there's something there that we just don't know about the position of these people in a society.
yeah, it would be nice. It would have been nice if I had condescended to read the introduction.
I
Um,
know now I will because I got to the end and I'm like, well, tell me what the hell's going on. Because like
I got. I was gonna say that's one thing frustrating about introductions is, it's like I'd like it if you introduced the book, not spoiled the whole fucking thing. Um, like that's like, can you guys introduce a book? Introduce it, not spoil. If you want to like talk about the whole book afterwards, like okay, have an afterward. But Jesus Christ,
yeah, that's like and there's
this is unfortunate. Sorry, we're having technical problems. Is this going to get better? Are we going to get better? Okay, we're back on. All right.
okay. But I was just saying like these deep events. Like I was really traumatized when I first read this book because of this point, and you're just like, oh my god, stop. So yeah, I will read it. However, having read the book retroactively, I can say that it wouldn't really have made a much of a difference. Probably,
Yeah,
I'm guessing. We'll see.
yeah. So we'll see about it.
Um, I
But
liked the mystic. I like so one thing I did like is okay. So yeah. Oh, sorry, you froze again.
no, no, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Yeah. Um, I guess the last thing I would say on this book is I just have a desire to learn more about this time period.
Yeah,
There just seems to be a there.
yeah. For me, it just stands as, I guess it's almost like a very clear symbol to me of this is what it's like to not care about action. This is what it's like to feel life is a series of impressions. Um, I think that's um, and it's like God, yeah. Western literature's a different universe in a way I did not realize. Um, yeah. So let's see. So next week we were planning on doing Paul Claudel's the tidings brought by Mary, or are we going? Or do you want to just go to straight to the tin drum?
No, I want to do some short things first, I've decided.
Okay,
So
that
let's do
sounds
the
good to me.
play and then we'll get in.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. That sounds good to me. All right. So, all right, Chris, it's been great, and yeah, see.
Thanks for a really weird piece of literature with me.
I'm very happy I read it. I'm very happy. Very
Deeply
enlightening.
strange, right?
Yeah, soul expanding. You know. So all right. So bye,
Great.
Chris. Bye, everybody.